In the next part of our trip to New York, we continued exploring the city with the hopes of getting some weather that matches the festive season. Yeah, seems New York had other plans. How are we feeling today?
Rainy, so no Brooklyn Bridge, but we'll do that tomorrow.
It all just meant we had to readjust to suit the rain. That gave us a great excuse to do less walking and more exploring using the subway.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
And that is the equivalent of London's Mind the Gap. Alongside the beautiful screeching sounds of the subway.
Where do we come on?
We've got a couple of stops. Brooklyn something.
28.
I know it was Brooklyn Bridge, but my brain was preoccupied with the iPhone camera settings. Anyway, our final stop is Brooklyn Bridge, where we'd be doing most of our exploring this second part of the New York trip. And in just a split second of me looking up to admire the buildings in the financial district, Tash was fighting her own battles with the weather.
Oh no, push it against the wind, push it against the wind.
Yeah, this way doesn't rain, but
Luckily, our first stop wasn't too far from the station. For lunch today, we stopped at the Beekman, which we came across when we looked for hotels in and around downtown Manhattan. A luxury hotel that offers dining with a stunning 9-story Victorian atrium with a skylight that forms its centerpiece and surrounding guest rooms at the upper floors. Also anchored by the bar room set below the dramatic space. We actually had more of a brunch here, going for their breakfast option, which was some of the least processed foods we ate in New York, but that of course came with a price. Oh yeah, and the tips. Definitely worth a stop by if you're in the area, or if you can afford to stay here. Just a street or two across from the Beekman, you could just about make out our next destination. Somewhere with very heavy history that had a global impact. Located at the heart of the 9/11 memorial site are two pools of flowing water set to the precise footprint of the original north and south towers, with bronze parapets surrounding each pool etched with the names of every victim of the attacks. Above ground you step into the oculus, Latin for eye, with a central skylight letting in enough light to flood its large volume that serves as both a transit hub and symbolism for the resilience of New Yorkers. The surrounding units serve retail and dining spaces typically, with the central hall used for what I assume are small public ceremonies. In this case, I think it was a ceremony related to law enforcement, seeing as there's so many of them around today.
Councilwoman Nina Burnikoff, representing Brooklyn's 48th District. Port Authority Police Commander Chief McNerney.
Anyway, another beautifully designed structure by one of my favorite architects, Santiago Calatrava. Sitting below ground on the site of the original World Trade Centers is the 9/11 Museum, a space dedicated to honoring the victims of the attack as well as giving visitors a closer look at the event's impact. It goes without saying that the event is one that reshaped society and politics and global security, and the museum creates a powerful experience giving context leading up to the attacks and its aftermath. The most striking being large-scale items from the buildings, like this section of the trident columns from the facade of the North Towers. You basically make your way around what would have been the structural foundations which stand in place like a firm reminder. The exhibition has everything from personal belongings to equipment from the first responders and emergency personnel, all of which are used alongside images and narrative displays to guide you through the timeline of the attacks. It is a museum worth showing to every generation as a stark reminder, yet again, that there are major losses of innocent lives on both sides of a war. After such a heavy experience like the 9/11 Museum, we needed something to reset. And just across the street, our next destination was a seemingly perfect experience to transition into. Now, this was a very different experience than the traditional museums I would typically prefer, and it didn't necessarily do the best job of changing my mind either, especially at the price point. But nonetheless, it was a good way to wind down from spending most of our day at the memorial. An experience they describe as stepping into a series of immersive art worlds. So, of course, I got the big boy Sony A7 IV out to capture some of the highlights. Each room is designed to trigger different senses, starting with the projection room, where you're surrounded by 360 degrees of immersive visuals, made even more imposing with the scale of the room itself. You then move into the infinity-style mirror rooms with a clever play on light and reflection. Before making your way through a flowery maze. Whilst the exhibitions might translate really well on camera and social media, I personally think there are much better things in New York to spend your money on. Even though we tried our best to get to the Brooklyn Bridge early enough before the crowd, it turns out that a few other tourists had the same idea. Still, for this time of year, it wasn't too bad with enough room to get some photos in, especially at this vantage point with the Manhattan Bridge as a backdrop. The bridge itself is pretty lively as you try to weave past both tourists and vendors along its stretch. All in all, it will take you a minimum of half an hour to walk, but with all the traffic and stopping, you could be here for an hour even. It's all worth it though, especially when you turn around for the views back into Manhattan, and with the help of the iPhone's telephoto lens, you could spot some other key iconic locations in the distance. And of course, Queens' finest, taking a well-earned break from crime fighting. Your friendly neighborhood. There was no better way to end our trip than taking a cruise along the Hudson with a dramatic sunset, and better yet, getting up close to its most iconic landmarks. I guess an even better way to experience this would have been taking a helicopter ride from the heliport, flying around the New York Harbour or the Manhattan skyline. Maybe next time when we're feeling a bit braver, but there's no denying that this is the second best thing. We're on the Circle Line sightseeing cruise which departs from Pier 16. Pretty much the perfect way to soak in the city as it transitions from daylight to darkness. The highlight being, of course, up-close photos of the Lady of the Harbour herself, with a golden backdrop that displays her in all her glory, like something out of a movie, because that's exactly what a trip to New York feels like. A timeless classic that you appreciate even more over time.